this subject in Scotland, do you?
Well, I think that's nonsense.
Which bit?
I think it was The Guardian came out and said 60% of Scots were Eurosceptic. So that I think that believes that
60% of Scots were Eurosceptic and wanted to pull out of the EU?
Well, that's what The Guardian said. It must be true.
You didn't realise you were such an avid reader of The Guardian. You believe
well,
everything
put it this way, UKIP in Scotland are on they were expecting to get 7 MSPs, according to a daily record poll. So that's not too bad. So I think the Scots are a lot more Eurosceptic than everyone tries to make out. And I mean, let's look at it this way. The Scottish National Party, they're not really a Scottish National Party. They're a European party. And they do, if they want more power in the Scottish Parliament, nothing will give Scotland more power than exiting the European Union. We'll bring all the fishing, agriculture, industry, all sorts of stuff back to the Scottish Parliament, and we'll be able to get our 200-mile fishing limit back, which the SNP don't seem to want, which is very odd for a national party of Scotland. Very odd indeed.
Well, let's put that to the... There's a positive case for you. You could have a lot more access to potential markets in fishing agriculture if you came out of the EU.
Just to pick up on the opinion polls first, every opinion poll consistently has shown that Scots are in favour of staying in the European Union. That's not saying that we don't have a job to do.
Right.
That's not what we'd say that we've not got a job to do, but they've consistently shown that, and we need to keep on going. On issues like more powers, now, we've questioned the government about this, about which new powers Scotland would see. They've not told us any. We've not had recommendations on any. Remember, they come back to London, it's responsibility of London.
No, they do not.
Finally, on fishing, and this is another example of where the member state often hides behind the European Union. On fishing, it was the Conservative government in the 1970s that described Scotland's fishing industry as being expendable, not the European Union.
Right, so which laws would come back, David Coburn, specifically to the Scottish government?
Again, it depends who's running it. As far as UKIP are concerned, we want fishing brought back to Scotland. We want our 200-mile limit back. The fishing is a great business for Scotland. At the moment, the Spanish are looting our seas and making a fortune out of it. We can do that ourselves here in Scotland, and that's much better for the Scottish economy.
Right.
How the Scottish nationalists can't understand that, I don't understand.
So is this the sort of argument you're going to use to try and convince the Scots, those that you think are Eurosceptic?
I think the Scots have picked it up for themselves.
Right.
They're not daft. And I'm going to tell you something else. We would not have the trouble we're having with the steel if it wasn't for expensive rules by the European Union about closing things like the Granite Power Station. We now have expensive power,
Chinese import.
and we can't. Well, that's also down to the EU because they in terms of tariffs, they've let Chinese dump steel in Scotland, which is not good. Now, why do we not have our own TTIP treaty, our own trade treaty with the United States? We'll do a much better one. And instead of dividing it by 27 different people, it'll just be 4 nations. What's wrong with that? And the TTIP is very bad for workers' rights, and Stephen Gethins knows that. And 2 of his MEPs, the SNP ones, were not present when we were voting on the TTIP thing, and we lost by 2 votes.
Let's pick up on TTIP. All right, well, let's pick up on TTIP, because actually we get a lot of emails about TTIP, people being worried that American companies will be able to get contracts and actually get rid of some of the workers' rights and conditions and things like the health service. Wouldn't be expecting the SNP to be signing up to something like that.
No, I mean, and the First Minister this morning, if you'd watched the full speech, expressed her significant concerns around TTIP.
Can you do anything about it?
But the very question that you would trust the London government on these kind of workers' rights over Brussels is an anomaly. I mean, let's face it, it was Brussels who made progress on things like maternity rights, paternity rights, various other workers' rights. If you look at the Trade Unions Act, you can show you what a London government will do. So this whole idea that Brussels, that working cooperatively as an independent member state with Brussels is worse than leaving London in charge is a myth.
Right. If it's such a big issue, this, as you and your colleagues and Nicola Sturgeon have said, why don't you share a platform with David Cameron and the Conservatives? This is beyond party politics, and that's what's been said.
In a simple word, because we want to win the referendum in Scotland. I mean, the Tories got their worst result in Scotland since 1865. David Cameron is a hugely unpopular figure. So my message to Mr Cameron would be, look, if you want the Scots to vote to stay in, the best thing to do is stay away.
Right. OK. If the UK votes to leave, we can expect the SNP to call another Scottish independence referendum, can't we, immediately?
Well, look, this could have been avoided. First of all...
Well, hang on, that's not the question I asked.
Wait a minute.
Isn't that what's going to happen?
Wait a minute. Let's take it one referendum at a time. But I think, first of all, this is something we try to avoid. The First Minister made the point this morning that this isn't the circumstance under which we want to campaign for independence. However, if the UK votes to leave and Scots vote to stay in, you will have seen a breakdown between what is meant to be an equal partnership of nations in this union. And I think in those circumstances, I think there will be calls for a second independence referendum.
How soon do you think?
Well, as I said, I think there will be calls, and I think we take it one referendum at a time. But there will have been a breakdown in that relationship between the nations.
I mean, David Coburn then is pushing Scotland out of the UK an acceptable price to pay for leaving the EU.
It's not going to happen. The Scottish Nationals will not go for a referendum and they think they can win it. And I can tell you, just because people may or may not like the European Union, does not mean to say they're going to want to leave the UK. The two things are completely unrelated. So that's absolute nonsense. And I tell you something, there is no difference in Scotland and England. I knocked on as many doors, both north and south of the border, and the person in the Pebble Dash semi in Glasgow has the same view as the person in the Pebble Dash house in Birmingham. There is no difference. Absolute nonsense.
To bring facts into it.
We like facts.
You wouldn't think about it. You wouldn't think it listening to Mr. Coburn. Every reputable poll has shown that Scots are consistently more in favour of remaining in the European Union than elsewhere.
There has been a variation, hasn't there?
Well, there has been a variation from 75 to 25 to about 60-40, but significantly higher than the sort of 50-50 we see in the rest of the UK. That does not say anything's been taken for granted. Every vote will have to be fought for.
Can I just, before we see, hang on, David Coburn, just before I let you go, I need to ask you about the UKIP's plan or proposal for blaming the EU, rather, for restricting the power of toasters. Is that still the case?
Well, they apparently managed to stop some legislation until after Brexit because they were so terrified they might... Oh yes, apparently they're holding back their legislation till after Brexit or after the referendum in order to not terrify British voters. So I'm probably one of the few MEPs have actually achieved something, actually stopped something.
Right.
It's amazing.
Except, is it true?
It is true, and humour is a dangerous thing. I'm afraid the European Union suffer from a lack of it.
All right, thank you.
Can I just say one more?
Project Fear. Yes, on that note of positive, upbeat campaigning, thank you both.
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.